So I love tech videos. Like, I love watching them, but I also love making them, clearly. And they also have lots of numbers and stats and specs and technical details that are important. They matter a lot, but they can also be hard to keep full track of. What a lot of people probably don't see as much is the writing process that goes into each one of these videos. I take a lot of pride in getting better at this part of it over time, like getting better at writing product reviews, understanding products, at telling the stories of these products, but I don't always get it 100% right. So with an audience as big and discerning as you guys are, I don't take that responsibility lightly. So I've been trying a bunch of different things over the last couple of years to try to specifically minimize the number of mistakes or errors that can make it all the way through to the finished product. Things like just getting multiple eyeballs on the video while it's being made and before it's done, adding a specific fact-checking stage of my production process so that we can catch errors before the final export, stuff like that. At the beginning of this year, sort of codified a new process that I felt really happy with. So now that it's 50-something videos later, at the end of this year, thought it would make sense to look back and see how that went and share it with you guys. So to do that, my team and I went back through every single long-form video uploaded this year again and combed through, specifically looking for any type of errors at all that made it through to the end of the process, and also categorized what type of mistake it was. So we combed through comment sections, but also Reddit threads and basically anywhere else that there was any commentary on any of the videos, just to make sure we were thorough and found everything. So I have all of that here in front of me. And my conclusions are, 1, we still have some work to do, and 2, I wish YouTube would bring annotations back. Do you guys remember the annotations feature? This was one of the oldest features on YouTube where you could add small text over the top of videos in a little box after it was uploaded. And that was a pretty ideal way to add small fact corrections or extra information that you find after upload. Unfortunately, it was discontinued, probably because of people abusing it. You used to be able to add links, like clickable links to annotations, so people would add full screen spammy links, and obviously that didn't make any sense. But YouTube, if you're watching this is my official petition to bring back text annotations. We don't need any links, just text annotations, please. I say that because there's basically 2 types of errors that we found. And I think this is probably, it's not just me, this is true of I think a lot of other tech channels and also finance channels, business channels, anyone who's talking about a lot of detailed stuff that either could be updated or they could get slightly wrong. Because the first type of error is just something that is technically incorrect, but that doesn't affect the conclusion of the video. So it doesn't require any sort of big correction, but would be perfect for annotations. And then the other type of correction, of course, or error, is something that is bigger than that does require a bigger correction. Something like a pinned comment, which you might have seen in the past. Unfortunately, the correction rarely gets as much attention or as many views as the original piece, so that's another reason for this video. So anyway, without any further ado, here is every mistake that I made in 2025. So in my Samsung Galaxy S25 review, when talking about why Samsung plays it safe in the US, I used OnePlus as an example and said, and it doesn't really work with every carrier, like Verizon, you can forget about it, but that is not true. OnePlus 13 did end up working just fine with Verizon, like a lot of other previous OnePlus phones. I should have just stuck with using some of the other examples I had done earlier in the video, like Vivo or Xiaomi, or literally any other company that is not active in the US to talk about this issue. Thankfully, the point still stands. So then in my PowerBeats Pro 2 review, I actually quoted my pre-release briefing, meeting with Apple and Beats, where someone from the Beats team said something surprising. They said that the PowerBeats Pro are the most popular, best-selling headphones in the world, which actually at the time stood out to me because it didn't seem right. But then I actually checked the reviewer's guide we got as well, which had this quote saying that PowerBeats have been the most popular earhook product since it first launched in 2010. Still hard to believe. And then I followed that up in my video by saying this. I have not been able to verify this, and I have no way that I've found to confidently check those exact sales numbers. But sure enough, after all that, the video goes up, and then I get an email from someone on the Beats team who wanted to clarify that what they meant by that was actually that PowerBeats are the most popular earbuds in the Beats lineup. Which would have just been easier to say, and I hate when companies do that. An annotation would have been nice there. Then in my Nothing Phone 3A/3A Pro review, I said the phone would be getting 6 years of software updates, but it's actually supposed to be getting 6 years of security updates and 3 OS updates, not necessarily 6 years of them. In my M4 MacBook Air review, I accidentally called it a MacBook Pro once near the end. But here's a more important question that I ask basically every year with this MacBook Pro, because we always talk about this base price, which is just really unfortunate, but thankfully, because it's near the end, you've sort of already figured out that it's a MacBook Air. It's just an example of one of the things that makes it through because I don't even think to check it. Like I just hear it, it sounds right, and it makes it through. So that's on me. In my Bionic Ability Hand review, I talk about the way that users will control the hand with EMG technology, which I described as they had this wristband with a bunch of sensors inside that measured the electrical signals that my brain's sending through my nerves. And that is not exactly accurate. What would have been more accurate and still pretty concise is to say that the EMG band is measuring electrical activity produced by the muscles that is caused by brain activity, but it's not actually measuring the brain activity itself. If that makes sense. Kind of semantics, but the point still stands that it is really cool tech. In my CMF Phone 2 Pro review, I said, this year, it's also modular, but doesn't work with basically any of the accessories from that last CMF phone, except for the lanyard and the kickstand. The lanyard and the kickstand. So then in my top 5 Android 16 features video, I said, and this latest update is almost purely aesthetic, especially in this first beta. So out of habit, I was calling this Android 16 Beta 1 because I typically review the software around that stage, Beta 1 stage, but this was actually Android 16 QPR1 Beta 1. And yes, that is different. So QPR stands for Quarterly Platform Release. So the Android Beta 1 stuff that I was doing before was before the stable release of Android, where the Android 16 QPR1 Beta 1 was actually after the stable release because I was doing it slightly later in the process. So just making that distinction, I updated the description to make that clear, but that's the difference. In my Samsung Galaxy S25 Edge review, I have a graphic while talking about battery sizes, and I wrote iPhone 16 Air accidentally. There obviously is no iPhone 16 Air. This was during the 17s, but it's also not the 17 Air, it's just the iPhone Air. You obviously knew what I meant, but that's just a sloppy thing that I should be better at. Similar thing in the OnePlus 13S review, I correctly said up to 0.5 TB of storage, but the on-screen graphic accidentally says 1 TB of storage. That does not exist. Then in my Nothing Phone 3 review, when complimenting the display, I mentioned that it has a 1000 Hz touch sample rate, so it's even more responsive than the Phone 2. It also has 2160 Hz PWM dimming, so it actually had 960 Hz PWM dimming. Frustratingly though, the official reviewer's guide from Nothing, which they give you, and that's my official source for the specs on things like this, said 2160 Hz PWM dimming in it because that was true about the phone that I was reviewing while I was making that video review. But the day before embargo, they pushed a small update to the phone that actually changed it to 960 Hz. So just to be clear, a reviewer's guide, I've referenced this before in a couple other videos, but it's just a document that you get, usually PDF, with the new unreleased device from the company that sort of breaks down all of the details and specs and all the new technical things you need to know about that thing. And you can use it as much or as little as you want to guide what to dig into. That's up to the reviewer. But that is my source for the official specs because I obviously can't fact check my specs that I say by Googling it because Google's just going to give me rumored specs basically. In my Pixel 10 review, I said, my personal biggest annoyance with the Pixel 9 was the optical underscreen fingerprint reader was kind of slow, but the Pixel 9's fingerprint reader was in fact also ultrasonic. It was still bad and it was still one of my biggest annoyances, but that was definitely incorrect. So I added a pinned comment on that video for that fact correction. Then in my Apple event hands-on with all the newest iPhones, I said, the design is mostly unchanged other than the new colors. Same screen sizes, same dimensions, same camera bump. Not exactly. The iPhone 17 base is actually slightly narrower and slightly taller than the base iPhone 16. So that gives it enough room for a slightly larger 6.3-inch display versus 6.1. Then in my AirPods Pro 3 review, talking about the new heart rate feature, I said, apparently it's using its own algorithms and software to decide which is the better source to take that data from, because at no point does the app tell you or let you choose where it's getting your heart rate. Yeah, it does. It does actually, and it's right there in the bottom corner. It shows that it's getting the heart rate data from my earbuds. How did I miss that? But it still, for some reason, never lets you pick a better source, like the Apple Watch that I'm literally wearing in that review while I'm doing that test. So then in my unboxing every iPhone video, I talk about iPhone Air for a bit and compare it to Samsung's S25 Edge, the other ultra-thin phone, where I mention also certainly sacrifice long-term cooling of this flagship chip by leaving out the vapor chamber from their bigger flagship brothers. But no, Samsung actually still does fit a vapor chamber in the S25 Edge. They've made one that's thinner and wider, and they deserve credit for that. So then in my iPhone 17 review, I mentioned that the base phone didn't have millimeter wave 5G, which I should have fact-checked. I just looked and saw that it didn't have the cutout, but I was wrong. Thankfully, I kind of said this like as its own little phrase/sentence, so I was able to cleanly cut it out of the video using YouTube's editor built in. So that was nice. Then in the Xiaomi 17 Pro Max review, I compared it to the iPhone 17 Pro Max. Naturally, it's what everyone wanted. And as part of this, I showed the Antutu benchmark score for each of these phones next to each other. But I should be more careful with this, specifically when it's cross-platform. Just because they're both phones doesn't mean the Antutu score for each of them is actually comparable. I can compare different Android phones and their Antutu scores amongst themselves, and different iPhones and their Antutu scores amongst themselves. But in trying to make my point that the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 was really, really good, I should not have used synthetic benchmark scores from cross-platform test. That's just something I should do better with. In my OnePlus 15 review, I talk about the ceramic back and how tough it is, but it turned out only the sandstone colorway of this phone had the specific ceramic treatment that I was talking about in the video. The other stuff that I demoed all still worked, but it's just because it happened to be really, really tough glass. In the last Dope Tech video of the year, in the final section with the Nikon ZR, I said, with a 24 megapixel stacked CMOS sensor, semi-stacked, officially. And then last but not least, in the Xiaomi SU7 car review, when talking about the prices of the car, I used the local price in Chinese yuan converted to US dollars. But then later, for the Tesla Model 3 performance price, I used the US price of $55,000. But to make it more equivalent and consistent, I should have also used the locally available Tesla Model 3 performance there, and then converted that price from Chinese yuan to US dollars. And that would have ended up closer to $46,000. And so that is it. And that is a lot. So what I learned during this process of like looking back through everything is, of course, I have a long way to go in terms of getting closer to perfect, in making my filter better for what makes it through to the end. Especially in, it's a lot of these things that are like little numbers or specs or facts that I think I know, so I'm not double checking, but I should be just to make sure I'm getting them right. But I was inspired to do this and to make this video by Tom Scott. In 2023, he did a video going back over all of his previous mistakes and updating and correcting them. And I think, honestly, I think my takeaway is basically the same as his. Yes, there will be future mistakes, hopefully a lot less of them, but also just to keep in mind Hanlon's razor when you see those mistakes is basically not to attribute to malice what can be explained by stupidity. I've seen so many like conspiracy comments of people saying, oh, Marquez, he'll throw in like a factual inaccuracy here and there just to, engagement bait or keep people commenting about stuff and keep engagement high. No, that's not true. I would rather not make any mistakes, and I'm going to try my best not to. But hey, thanks for sticking with me and holding me to a high standard. I appreciate you guys for that. And thanks for watching. And I'll catch you in the next video, which will be probably the highest fact-dense video I have ever uploaded. It's going to be a good one. See you there. Peace.